This is a special presentation brought to you by the Daf Map, based on one of the lectures given by HaRav Yehonasan Berger Shlita. Please check out our other videos and shiurim at www.thedafmap.com.
Today's shiur begins 13 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Hey. In other words, a little more than halfway down. Notlon vs. Tfusason. The topic at hand is featured under our Nosay, the topic heading, on the side of the Gemara, where we've written Hamoitze Mace, one who finds a corpse. Notlo vs. Tfusaso. He takes the body, but he must also take the surrounding earth with the body when transferring it to a proper burial site. This, of course, is what we've learned in our Mishna that we learned in our previous shiur. The Gemara asks, Heichi domi tfusa. What is meant by tfusa? We mentioned in translating the surrounding earth, but what's meant more specifically? HaRav Yehuda, Omar Kra. The pasuk says, where Yankov Avinu at the end of his life was telling Yosef that I command you to take me from Egypt where he died for a permanent burial in Moras HaMachpelah in Eretz Yisrael. So the pasuk says, "Unesasani mi Mitzrayim," and you carry me from Egypt. And the drosha is Mikarka Mitzrayim tol imi, from the earth, from the ground of Mitzrayim, take along with me. In other words, not just my body, but the ground that I was buried in when I died and buried in Mitzrayim. V'kamo shiur tfusa, and how much is that? Piresh Rebbe Elazar. The Tosefos points out that this is Rebbe Elazar ben Pedos and Amoira, not to be confused with a Tana. So Rebbe Elazar, the Amor Rebbe Elazar ben Pedos says, Noitel offer tichuach v'choifer b'visula shalosh etzbois. When you're removing the body that you chanced upon, you take it, all soft earth, offer tichuach, loose earth, that's surrounding the body, on which the body was lying, plus you dig into karka basula. Basula is virgin soil. In other words, it's compacted earth that was never cultivated. So it's, in addition to the loose earth that the body is lying on, also to dig an additional 3 fingers width of earth into the ground surrounding the location the body was lying in. Meisvei, well, we raise a question from a Tanaic source. V'kamo shiur tfusa, the concept or the halacha of tfusa that we have been discussing, what is its amount? What's the size? What are the dimensions? Piresh Rebbe Elazar ben Tzadok. Now here you have a Tana. It's true also the name Elazar, but we made a distinction before. So Rebbe Elazar ben Tzadok says, Noitel es hakesmin ves hakosusois v'zorikes avadoin umaniachas asvekes v'shar mitztarif l'rov binyanos shelmeis l'rov atzamos l'melo tarvid rekev. Of course, we read a lot. We didn't explain anything. So now we go over the source, explaining each item. But why did we read it so quickly? First of all, you did not see in this source any reference to digging into virgin soil 3 fingers. And 3 fingers width of, 3 fingers width of depth into the soil, surrounding soil, wasn't mentioned. That is essentially the problem that this Tanaic source poses for Rebbe Elazar, namely Rebbe Elazar ben Pedos. So now let's go over the source, but this time along with Rashi. The source said you take es hakesmin. Kesmin are twigs that are found around the body. Now, what do twigs have to do with a grave? So the body, making the assumption that it was buried in a wooden coffin, so when the wooden coffin started to decay, it leaves twig-like pieces of wood that are there. There are other explanations that you can see in Rashi as well as other Meforshim, but for our purposes, that will do for now. The Tosefos that the source says that you also take along with the body are clods of earth, clumps of earth that got stuck together from body excretions, like there might have been blood or other fluids that cause that to happen. So we'll say they're corpse related. The source mentioned Zorikas Avadoy, and Rashi explains that if there are things in the grave that are definitely not corpse related, so you don't have to take them. And Miniachas Asfekis, regarding this, Rashi says if you have things in the grave that are doubtful, maybe they are body related, maybe not. So the Rashi says, you push them off to a different location to the side. We consider the possibility of them being a source of defilement, so we don't want them to be in a place where people may become defiled from it, so we push them off to the side. And hasha'ar, other things that are part of the corpse, Rashi says, Vashar dvorim shein min ames, the casement, the other things that are part of the body and the twigs that are there are mitztaref, they join together. Now, we have a girsa in our Gemara text that the Gra seems to delete, but the text that we have right now says L'rov binyono shel meis, they can join up to cause the majority of the body structure, or the majority of or the Rov Atzamos is a measure of bones that are metame ba'ohel, and molo tarvid rekev. Also, rekev is body dust from its decomposition. So these other things that are in the grave can join up to complete the quantities just mentioned of these, we'll say, corpse sources of defilement. For our purposes, that what we have to emphasize was, and you can see this also emphasized in the Tosefos. We have a little star, 4 lines from the end of the Tosefos commentary. Alma tfusa rozum tzodik eino zokuk litol ofar deino lachpor bekarka besula kiim vadai hamesus sveko. As far as the Tana is concerned, there's no digging into the virgin soil. And that is our question. We continue in the Gemara. Who the Omar, namely Rebbe Lazar, the Amora, Rebbe Lazar Bedos, Kihai Tana. He has a Tanaic basis for his position. The Sanya, V'kamo shiur tfusa, how much is tfusa? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum ben Azai. Tosefos says this Rabbi Yochanan is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. It's a Tana who's quoting Ben Azai. Noitel offer tichuach v'choifer b'vsulo sholosh etzbos. And it's very, very clear. We underline the main phrase, very much the basis for what Rebbe Lazar ben Pedos had said at the opening of this piece of Gemara. Bodek Heimenu. We continue to the top of Omid Beis. We had learned in our Mishna that if you find 3 bodies that are between 4 and 8 amas apart from each other, lying next to one another, so then you have to check an additional 20 amas to determine whether there are more bodies. That is because you found 3 bodies together. So that created the suspicion that we have a shchunas kmoros. Rava raises a new scenario based on what we just said. We have a topic heading on the side, Nosay Mivneh. You can see a diamond featured. These are Shnei Lishonos Barava, 2 versions of Rava. Mahadin kishebola gufana umotza mei shlishi. what is the halacha going to be if you chanced upon a body and you removed it? Because of the halacha that says if you chance upon one body, so you can move it. And then he checked further and found another body, another singular body, moved it. And then he finds a third body. Now, had he not moved the previous two bodies, so he would now be in a situation where there are three bodies, and that is mechayev him to check. But at this point, though, you don't have the three bodies together. So what do? Omar Rava, Bodak upina. Pina means to remove. Bodak upina, he found a second body and removed it. Bodak v'ashkach, he checked further and found a third body, but in the meantime the other two bodies were removed. Lo hai mefani le gabi hanoch trei, you are not to move this body to where you brought the other two. V'lo hani trei legabi hai chad, nor bring back the two to where this one has been found, i.e. this third body was found. The second version, Ikodi Amri, Omar Rava, Kevon Shinitno Rashus Lefanos, Mefane Lahon. Since he had a right to move the first body, he had a right to move the second body. And now when he comes upon the third body, he's not coming upon three bodies. So he has the right to move this one as well. The Rashi, he quotes a girsa that we have. Let us pick up the Rashi on the upper part of the narrow lines, about the seventh narrow line. V'hachi pirusha, Omar Rava, kevan shinit reshus lefanos lahen, kishemotzes hashnayim. When he found the first two, he had a right to move them. Kidisnan motzes shnayim, notlon vest fusasan, mefani luhu lahai shlishi legabayu. He can move the third body to where he moved the first two. V'amai v'mefani lahu. Well, why should he be allowed to do that? L'shavinu shchunas kvoros. She yichazreim l'mekoymon v'yachzik oisoi mokem ki'ilu adayin yesham loros achiros v'tzivosav v'lo yikonsu oisei taros l'sham k'dei shlo yahilu ala tumah. So the Gemara now asks what Rashi just explained at length. The Gemara asks v'lishavinu shchunas kvoros. What the Gemara says is, well, make it into a shchunas kvoros. Rashi explained that, well, if you found a third body, why not bring back the first two and establish this area as a shchunas kvoros, which would then, of course, in your mind's eye, create the image that there might be other burial caves in the vicinity, which we discussed in our previous shiur. And the practical bearing of that would be that people who need to remain tahor should not enter that area, because if they enter that area, they're getting involved with a possible overshadowing of the dead, because having found three bodies, one next to the other, creates the shchunas kvoros consideration, and which means you have to then check another 20 amas, because there might be another burial cave over here. Omar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish answers why we're not going to behave in such a restrictive fashion. Ila motzu v'tiharu Eretz Yisrael. The word Ila might loosely be translated as an excuse, or a reason was found for us to metaher, to treat without defilement the land of Israel. And now we look at Rashi together. Omar Reish Lakish Ilo Klomar Kishinitno Reshus Lefanos B'Shalomotze La'echad Ushnayim. Once we're given halachic permission to move a body when you find one or two, Kihadu Motze Lahach Shlishi, when you find the third body after you already moved the first two, Mefani Le Gabayu, you can move it to the other two. Kidei L'Tayer Es Hamokim Hazeh, so as to establish this area as being undefiled. Shelo lahachzikoi sheyesh ma'oros sivoseh. By removing the body, we're making a statement that this area is not one that we are going to consider or suspect of having other burial caves. With this leniency, there'll be no restriction on kohanim or people on their way to do a korban pesach to walk over there.
In our Mishnah, at the top of the previous Amud, namely Amud Aleph, we saw the procedure involving discovery of 3 mesim and the requirement of checking 20 amas further. The Mishnah mentioned that if one finds another mace at the end of the 20 amas, he continues checking. Our Gemara now raises the question, Bodak me esrim amo velo motza mai. We take a look at the Tosefos. Bodak me esrim amo velo motza mai de leechad min haruchos mi amrinon ki hechi de ruach zeh lo motza. Just like in this particular direction at the end of 20 amas you didn't find. Lo yehei zeh zokuk livdoik l'shar ruchos. One is not expected to check in another direction 20 amas. For example, if one found the 3 mesim and he checked 20 amas north of them, he is not expected to check 20 amas south of them. From the fact that you did not find another mace 20 amas north, so you don't have to check 20 amas south. So the Gemara's question was, in fact, do you have to check in another direction? And the Gemara answers, Omar Rav Menashia bar Yirmiyah, Omar Rav. Tosefos has a different girsa as far as the name is concerned, but the Gemara says, Shchunas Kvoros. It's a very brief answer. We take a look at Tosefos. Omar Rav Mesharshia Shchunas Kvoros, Klomar, Shchunas Kvoros shel shlosha shenimtzu kvar yeshlo. The 3 mesim that you found establishes that as a shchunas kvoros, and we all have already learned that means they remain there. Avol lo yitzorach yoser livdok, but he does not need to check beyond that. My taima. This is already from the Gemara. The next few words of the Gemara. Ila motzu v'tiharu es Eretz Yisrael. So we read that again in the Gemara. My taima. Why do you say that once you found the 3 mesim, you checked in a particular direction and did not find an additional corpse, you don't check any further? And that's what we mean by shchunas kvoros. And why is that? Why are we saying that you don't check any further? Amar Reish Lakish, Ila Motzu V'tiharu Es Eretz Yisrael. The same expression we saw just a few lines earlier, and that is that you found what you found, and we do not strive to establish Tuma beyond what's absolutely necessary when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. Let us glance at the Rashi right before the next Mishnah commentary of Rashi. V'tiharu es Eretz Yisrael, klomar, afapi shelo motza, elo halolu shloisha kvorim, even though you found only the 3 mesim that we found, amrina zuhi shchunas kvoros shel ir, we say this is the equivalent of the cemetery of that city, ushar subivos ha'ir tahor. And beyond that, the other surrounding areas of the city remain tahor. That's what's included in the expression of Ila Matzu V'tiharu Es Eretz Yisrael.
We now continue with a new Mishnah. Kol Sofek Negoyim B'tchila Tahor Ad Shelo Nizgak L'Tumah. When there's a matter of doubt concerning Tzoras Tumah, and the doubt arises concerning a situation where there had not been any tzoras beforehand, so In a case of doubt, we declare tahara. Mishenizkak l'tuma, when you have a situation that Soras Tuma was established, and now a doubt arises, maybe there is tahara, sfeiko tome. We say no. Until you can establish definite purification, we're not going to rule leniently. So there's two contrasting cases here. One is a doubt arises in a situation where there had been no previous soras. The second case is where there was definite soras, and the doubt arises now, can we establish purity? Tosefos offers very concrete illustrations based on what you see in Maseches Negoim. Maseches Negoim is found in Seder Taras. There's no Gemara on that Masechta. It's a Masechta of Mishnayos. Nevertheless, Tosefos quotes the relevant cases. Let's learn the Tosefos together. Kol Sofek Negoim B'tchila Ad Shelo Lo Nizkak L'Tuma Tor. The double underlining is here in order for you to be able to contrast it with the next double underlining, Mishenizkak L'Tuma. In other words, you see the two contrasting cases that our Mishnah features. So, in the case of Ad Shelo Nizkak L'Tuma, we can say Tahor, the Ukmei as Achaskose. When you have a doubt, and you have a chazaka, meaning a previously known status, you assume that status. So we knew there was a status of non-tuma up till now. Now a doubt arises. So I go and fall back onto the chazaka, the previously known status. What is an example of that? Two people approached a kohen. The kohen is the one who rules on matters of tzoras. Bozeh baheres kegris, ubozeh baheres kesela. One had a baheres is a whitening of the skin. It's that kind of we'll call discoloration that is it serves as the grounds for suspecting tzoras. So one of the two people has a bright spot or a white spot on his skin that's the size of a gris. A gris is a shiur, known amount. We're going to give the loose or general translation of a bean. I understand that doesn't mean too much for us, but it's not important. All you have to realize is that a gris is a given size. And the second party has a baheres, has a white spot the size of a sela. A sela is a coin that was known, a known coin, and the bright spot had that size on it. L'soif shavua, a week later, bozeh kesela, bozeh kesela. Each one of these people is viewed by the kohen having a bright spot of a sela. Now, one obviously did not increase in size, and the other one did. V'eni yodeh eize mehen posa. And I don't know which one had, of these two people, I don't know which one had the gris size, which is smaller than the sela, the week before. So one of these guys had his nega expand. Now, expansion of a nega is grounds for declaring him a full-fledged mitzorah. But I don't know which one of these two fellows had that expansion taking place. So we rule their tohor. Mishenizkak l'tuma, Tosefos continues, Hasa meforish ketzad. So here we explain the opposite case. Shnayim bo eitzel kohen bozeh kesela ubozeh kegris. Two people come to a kohen. One has a sela size discoloration, the one has a mere gris size discoloration. L'sof shavua bozeh kesela v'oid ubozeh kesela v'oid. A week later, there is expansion. Both of the fellows experienced expansion. One was a serious level, went from a gris to a sela v'od, a sela coin size plus. And the other one also experienced expansion because he started off with a sela, and now it's a Sela V'Yod. What do we say? Well, they're Tamein. They're definitely both Tamein. L'sof, Bozeh u'Bozeh Kisela. A week later, we find that both of them have Negoyim that measure just one Sela. V'eino Yodea Eza Mehem Keha. And we don't know which one is called Keha. Keha is an expression that the Gemara itself asks, what does Keha mean? For our purposes, though, it's going to mean Tohar. We don't know. Usually the word Keha is translated as something become weakened, dull, it's opposite of bright. But for our purposes, it would be the basis of declaring him no longer a Metzora. So, but I don't know which one has that. Now, which one would that be? The one that went from the Sela V'Yod back to what he originally had been, a Sela, so he is not in a state of expanded original Nega anymore. So since he's not in the state of expanded original Nega, he's Tahor. But the other guy, who was started off with a gris, which is smaller than the Sela, so fine, it got reduced from a Sela V'Yod, Sela plus, to one Sela. But he's still a person that experienced expansion of his original Nega. And that fellow is still a definite Metzora. Well, what do we rule in this case? Shnehem Temeim. Ad Shiyafsu Shnehem Lios Kigris. They are both considered Tomei until they would, both of these Negoyim would shrink down to the size of a gris. And why do we rule this way? The Chol Chan Ukmei B'Cheskas Tumo. Both of these fellows are set upon their status of Tumah. We have a case here of definite Tumah. Can I reestablish Tahara? I can't do it if I have a matter of doubt, as we just illustrated. So now we go back to the Gemara. Mino Hani Mili. From where do we know, as Tosefos explains, that prior to knowing Tumah, in other words, given a situation where I knew up till now there was no Tumah, and now a suffix arises, a doubt arises. From where do we know that we rule leniently? That's the question here. On the side of the Gemara, we have a Nosay Mivneh heading, which explains the presence of the triangles. You will see there are two Lishonos B'Rav Yehuda Amarav. Mosai Amrinon B'Sofek Negoyim Yesh L'Taher. Under what circumstances do I say that when there's a doubt concerning the Goyim, I should be lenient, I should be Metaher? So now the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav Amakra L'Taharo Oy L'Tamo. So in this pasuk, which is in the context of Negoyim, the context of Tsaras, you see these words. And the word that comes first is L'Taharo. Hayel u'posach bo hakosov b'tara tchila. Since the pasuk opens up with Tara, it shows us that when you have a matter of doubt, so maintain the Tahara. Wali hachi afilu mishenizkak l'tuma nami sfeiko tahor. Well, if it's based on the fact that the word torah appears first in the pasuk, so even if you have a situation of doubt arising on the heels of definite tumah, but the pasuk is saying go in the direction of Tara, and now I have a doubt, maybe one of the fellows was Tor, became Tor, so let's declare them both Tor. Elo ki itmar Rav Yehuda Marav aho itmar. If Rav Yehuda said anything, he said it on the following. The source continues with laws concerning Tsaras, and amongst the laws of Tsaras involves the growth of a white hair in the midst of the blemish, the white discoloration. So it says in this source, Im baheres kodma l'ser lavan, if there was first the white spot, the baheres, the whitening of the skin, and there later grew a white hair in the middle of that white splotch of skin, Tomei, that creates a situation of Tumah. It becomes a full-fledged Mitzorah. And V'im Se'ar Kodem Lebaheres, if first the person had a white hair, a Se'ar Lovan, growing on his body, growing from normal flesh-colored skin, and then after the white hair had developed, then white skin developed around it. Tahor, that's not grounds for establishing Tumah. Safek, Tameh. In the case of Safek, where there's a doubt, so we declare Tumah. Rabbi Yeshua Omar, Keha. And Rabbi Yeshua says, we view the situation of doubt as Keha. My Keha, what do you mean by that? Omar V'Yudah, Keha V'Tahor. So you see, as we explained earlier, that Keha means we go in the direction of leniency, of tahara, of purity. V'Dilma Keha V'Tameh. Maybe it means that it became dimmer and we should rule stringently. Omar V'Yehuda Omar Rav, Omar Kra. And here you can see the second citation of Runo Rav, and his dealing with the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, L'tara o l'tamo. Hayul Pasach bo akosov b'tara tchila. Since the Pasuk mentions Tara first, when you have a doubt, and we just spoke about the case of a doubt, did the white hair appear before the white splotch, or the white splotch appeared first and the white hair then grew within it? And if you have a doubt about that, we declare Tara. That's what we're supposed to understand from Keha. The Mishna. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading, which reads, B'shivat rochim boitkim es hazav. Through 7 ways we test out a person, kedei ladas shemashiyotza mimenu have zov, to establish if the emission that he is experiencing is the emission called zov or ziva, which establishes defilement, tumah. Now, a Mishnah like this, truthfully, requires a great deal of background. We're not going to delve into all of the background information in the context of our shiur. The Mishnah here is essentially brought in, is cited here by virtue of the similar structure that we saw in the previous Mishnah with the issue of the Safek Negoyim. Namely, if you're approaching a situation where there had not been definite Tumah and a Safek arises, so we test out to establish whether or not we should apply stringency. However, if you have a situation where definite Tumah has already been established, then the appearance of the Zov emission, whether it can be attributed to some outside reason or it comes without any explanation other than the fact that the body is secreting it, he'll be established as a Zav and required to bring a sacrifice. Now, there's more that we have to say before we can really get into the topic, and that is basically what is Zav. So Zav, or Zov is the name of the emission. It's a type of emission coming forth from males. It's an emission that is not the same as semen. There are differences between the two. Elsewhere, the Gemara gives an explanation of those differences. For our purposes, just recognize they're different. The question is, with regard to our Mishnah, is the Ziva flow in question going to create Tumas Zav? Now, Tumas Zav takes place when there were 2 Zov sightings. Upon a second Zov sighting, a second one on 2 consecutive days, or 2 sightings on one day, the individual will then be obligated to observe 7 clean days. If a Zav has 3 consecutive Zov sightings, not only is he Tomei for 7 days, he has to observe 7 clean days, but at the end of that, he has to bring sacrifices. He's Chayav Korbanos. What happens with 1 Zov sighting? Well, 1 Zov sighting will basically mean the person is Tomei just till the evening. Like a person that had a semen, a sighting of Keri, or of Shikva Zera. What about the second sighting? So when it comes to the second sighting, if it can be attributed to one of 7 outside causes, we call that, in this context, it's a sighting because of ones. Ones, in most contexts, has to do with something that's beyond your control. In this context, it means it's a sighting, in this case a second Zov sighting, that can be attributed to some outside cause. If that's the case, then he does not become a Zav. He doesn't become a person obligated in observing 7 clean days, 7 days of purification. If, however, after asking 7 questions that the Mishna enumerates, and we can't find anything to attribute this second Zov sighting to, other than an inherent body excretion or exusion, then he will be considered a Zav requiring 7 clean days. Now, what happens? Well, we mentioned that he doesn't bring sacrifices just as a result of 2 sightings. If there's a 3rd sighting, so not only does he maintain the Tumah, but he also has to bring sacrifices. So do we raise questions regarding the 3rd sighting? Not necessarily. Not so. Why not? Because he's already established himself as Tomei. So you see the parallel between this Mishnah and the Mishnah before, that we make a distinction between a situation prior to establishing the Tumah, in contrast to a situation where Tumah has already been established. And the Tumah that we're talking about here is the 7-day Zav Tumah. Now the Mishnah. B'shiva drachim boikim es hazav ad shelo nizkak leziva. 7 ways, 7 questions that we would ask a Zav in a case that he hasn't had his second sighting. That's ad shelo nizkak leziva, means prior to his second sighting, or maybe more accurately, upon his second sighting, we want to evaluate why did it come about, and we'll ask 7 questions. B'maychol u'b'mishteh, is it a result of something that he ate? There are a heavy meal could bring it on, or drink. B'masa, a heavy burden. B'kfitza, through jumping. B'choli, some type of infirmity. V'mare, there are different explanations as to what mare is, but it has to do with seeing something. Tosefos mentions having seen an experience of intimacy between a man and a woman. There's another explanation that you see he saw something that causes a sudden fright. And number 7, Behirur, he might have been thinking thoughts that are impure. So if the second sighting came on the heels of any of these things, he would not be considered a Zav. We would attribute the Zav to one of these things, and not, now using the word of the Pasuk, not mi besoro, from his flesh. In other words, it's not something that is coming from the individual per se, without any other explanation. That would create the tumah. But if there's an explanation, that would prevent, in the meantime, from him becoming a Zav. He would not be considered a Zav with that second sighting that could be attributed to one of these 7 things. However, mishenizkak leziva, once a person becomes a zav, he had 2 zav sightings. Ein boitkenosay. We don't check out. We don't ask questions. Then we see a 3rd sighting, because mishenizkak leziva means he's already had 2 sightings. Ein boitkeno, so we're not going to check him out regarding the 3rd sighting. Onso usfeiko v'shichvazaro tmeim sheraglayim ladovar. Whether it's some type of ones, it's some type of outside reason, or there's a doubt, or he had an actual shichvazera sighting, he will be tomei. Now, tomei and a 3rd sighting means that he'll also have to bring a sacrifice. Sheraglayim ladovar. There is already grounds for suspicion. Rashi says, Sheraglayim ladovar shelo machmas onsohu elo machmas zivo mamish. If a person's already had 2 body sightings of ziva, meaning they came without any outside reason, a 3rd sighting is probably on the same grounds. The Mishna continues with something that would seem to be totally unrelated, and in fact, it is unrelated, other than the fact that you see the expression raglayim ladovar quoted. This is not the 2nd time. We saw it earlier in one of our previous dapim as well. If I'm not mistaken, on Daf Samach Gimel, we also saw Raglayim Ladover mentioned. Here, the Tosefos says explicitly that in this upcoming section, it's mentioned the case involving hitting someone in a death-threatening fashion, which has nothing to do with Maseches Nazir, but it's here because of the issue of Raglayim Ladover, suspicious grounds or fertile grounds for coming to conclusions. Now, what do we mean? So let's see the next case of the Mishnah. Hamakis Chavero, person inflicted an injury on his friend, he hit his friend, v'amdu lemisa, and it was calculated, it was evaluated that the victim would die from the impact. In other words, it was a type of blow that would be capable of killing someone. So we have a fellow that received a very hard blow, or a blow to a sensitive area of the body. V'hokel mimashoya, and as he was lying in bed, we saw his situation getting better, or his situation was improving. However, he didn't become fully healthy, just we saw some improvement. And then things took a turn for the worse, and he actually died. The victim died. Chayav. So the Tanakama rules that this is a case of capital offense of murder, and the offender is guilty of having committed a murder. Chayav means chayav as a rotzeach, and a rotzeach is put to death. Rabbi Nechemya Omer Potter. Rabbi Nechemya says he is exempt. And now the next phrase is actually the same words we saw before, but what does it apply to? So, if in the simple reading of the Mishnah, it would be a continuation as an explanation of Rabbi Nechemya. Sheraglayim ladovar. What would that be? Rabbi Nechemya will tell you the offender is innocent because we saw the victim improving. The fact that he took a turn for the worse, that's something that's an extraneous phenomenon, not related to the offender. There are other approaches saying that Raglayim Ladovar is really a throwback to the Tanakama, that is saying that even though the guy took a turn for the better, but he was the victim of a very hard blow, and the slight improvement that took place in the meantime doesn't detract from the seriousness of the original blow. And Raglayim Ladover means there's what to base yourself on in condemning the offender, even though there was an interim improvement period. Mino hani mili. Here the Gemara is asking, from where do we know that when a person has become a zav, with regard to the next sighting, the third sighting, which has halachic ramifications as far as a korban is concerned, we don't check out, we don't investigate anymore. In other words, for whatever reason the ziva appeared on the third day, it makes him a zav shechayav b'korbanos. So from where do we know this? And you see, we have a marking, if you want to call it a tooth shape, or an inverted crown. Under the Mivneh heading on the side, we've written Gishos, Limtso, Mokor, were different approaches to find a source, L'odikotoni, Bezav, the Mishenizkak, Leziva, Ein, Botkin, Oso. That a Zav, once he becomes established as a Zav, we no longer check out why the third Zav appearance came. So from where do we know this? Minohani mili, Omar Rabbi Noson, Omar Kro, V'hazov es zoivoi, la zochor v'la nekeva. And we learn from this, l'riyo shlishis iskash l'nekeva. When it comes to the third sighting, we see in the pasuk itself mentioned two sightings. It says Azov es Zovo, so there's two evil sightings. Now you come to a third sighting. The pasuk compares the male to the female. What do we know about female sightings of defilement, specifically blood flows? We know that the woman becomes tamea with a blood sighting from her reproductive area, regardless of if there's some type of extraneous explanation or not. In other words, if the woman jumped, or the woman had a big meal and then had a blood sighting, she's tamea. We don't try to explain it away, attributing it to some outside factor. A woman always is tamea when she has a blood flow, a sighting. So on the third sighting of the zav, he is parallel to the way we deal with women and their blood sightings. Zav, of course, is not a blood sighting, but it's a liquid, it's an exusion that makes men tameim. Just like women have their type of exusion, blood exusion, that makes them tameos. The Gemara continues with a question. V'hatanya. We have a source that reads as follows. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, B'shlishis boitkin oisoi, B'revius ein boitkin oisoi. Rabbi Eliezer says that regarding the third sighting, we do ask questions, because we want to know whether he shall bring a korban or not. And if it comes ba'oines, so he won't bring a sacrifice. A fourth sighting is in the context of a person, a zav, who started observing his clean days. Clean days meaning days without any zav sightings. So we have a zav that had 3 sightings, starts observing his clean days, and then there's a fourth sighting. So Rabbi Eliezer says, regarding that, ein bodkin oso, and he'll lose whatever number of purity days he counted till that point. So that even if there was a sighting that was ones related, he will nevertheless lose the days of purity that he counted to that point. So this Tanaic source presents a problem for what was said just up till that point. Up till that point, Reb Nosson said, according to the pasuk, a male is compared to a female upon the third sighting. Well, here you have an opinion that says regarding the third sighting, the man is not compared to the woman. A man's third sighting, according to the Tana Rebbe Eliezer, is subject to the investigation. A woman would not be subject to investigation. Elo be'esim komifligi. So rather, in order to explain these approaches, the approach of our Mishnah that said that regarding the third sighting it will be Tuma automatically, and according to the Tana Rabbi Lezer it won't be Tuma automatically, is based on how to approach the word es that you see in the pasuk. We read a pasuk before, Vazov es zoivoi. Rabbi Eliezer dorish esim. Rabbi Eliezer emphasizes esim, so that when you read the pasuk, you have Azov es zovo. Zav counts as one sighting. The word es counts as a second sighting, and zovo is a third sighting. And after the third sighting, only then do we compare the zocher to the nekeva regarding that fourth sighting, which was a question involving a ziva sighting during the purification days. But a third sighting, we will say, he is checked out. He is asked, making the third sighting not like a woman. For Rabbanon, lo darshi esim. The Rabbanon, the opinion that disagrees and says that the third sighting does not require checking because he doesn't emphasize the word es. So at what point is the man compared to the woman? According to Rabbanan, after two sightings. Namely, the third sighting will cause chiyuv korban automatically, whether it's a result of some other force or it was just internal body release. We mentioned that the ziva, once a person is established as a zav, the ziva will be considered tomei, whether it's onso, usfeiko, whether it's attributable to some outside source, or there's a matter of doubt. We nevertheless, according to the Mishnah, view that as tomei. And since you're dealing in the Mishnah with the third sighting, he'll have to then bring his sacrifices. The Gemara continues at the top of Samach Vavam and Aleph. Omar Rava, lo tema sofek chaza sofek lo chaza. The Mishnah's teaching of sofek, matter of doubt, being considered tomei. Don't attribute that to a case of a doubt. Did he see something or not see something? That's not the case. Ela vadai chaza. We're dealing with someone that definitely had a sighting. Sofek machmas shichva zera, sofek machmas re'iyah. The sofek is it a result of the shichva zera, or is it a result of a semen sighting, or is it an absolute ziva sighting? Kevon shenizkak l'tuma sfeiko tomei. Since you're dealing with a person at this stage where he's already been established to be a zav, he's had two zav sightings. So, in the case where he saw something and he doesn't know if it was related to an outside factor or it's an inherent ziva sighting, we rule stringently and say it is tomei. Let us look at the Rashi at the top. Lo tema, the high sfeika domer shemetame, the suffix that we said is considered ziva, considered defiling. The kaboy lemeimar sofek chaza, sofek lo chaza. The doubt being, did he have a sighting or not? The mishmachi lo mukminon olei tuma. In a case like that, we wouldn't establish him as tomei. Lo linyan chiyuv korban. Not with regard to bringing sacrifices, we would not consider it a third sighting. V'lo linyan stira im kvar yishlin nos yemei sifro. Nor would a situation like that be grounds for stira, for undoing pure days that he may have started counting. Kidechtiv v'sofrlo shivas yomim l'taroso. The pasuk indicates why we call it Yemei Sfiro, it's because he has to count 7 days of purity. So that's not the case of Safek. Ella, what's the case of Safek that our Mishnah is talking about, that we rule with stringency? Vadai Choza, he saw something. Umiu Safek Makma Shichva Zera. The Safek is, was it a sighting that you can attribute to an outside cause or not? At this point, it becomes irrelevant. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.
This was a presentation of the Daf Map. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to be informed of our other videos. For resources and more information, please visit our website at www.thedafmap.com.